I never imagined that my little test of character would turn into a full-blown nightmare. My daughter-in-law's family received me with looks of disdain as I pretended to be a humble mother who could barely make ends meet. What I discovered that night changed our family forever, especially when I found those hidden documents that revealed the true source of their immense fortune. But before I continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching us from, folks? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Sarah, I'm 52 years old, and I've always believed that a person's true essence only appears when they're in front of someone they consider inferior. Maybe that's why I decided to do what I did when my son Ryan announced his engagement to Chloe. Ryan has always been my pride and joy. He graduated from medical school with honors, and at 30 years old, was already a respected surgeon. Unlike many who grow up with privilege, my son never lost his humility. We raised him with strong values, even after my husband Michael's business took off and our financial situation changed completely. When Ryan introduced us to Chloe 2 years ago, I liked her immediately. She was smart, hardworking, and seemed genuinely in love with my son. The only detail that bothered me was that, in 2 years of dating, we had never met her family. There was always an excuse. Her parents were traveling, busy with their businesses, or unavailable. Until the engagement happened and, finally, the invitation to dinner at her parents' mansion in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Los Angeles, Bel Air. Ryan was nervous. He wanted us to make a good impression. "They're a bit old-fashioned," he commented, which only increased my curiosity. That's when I got the idea. I didn't tell anyone, not even my husband, Michael. "Ryan, honey, I'm going to have to go to that dinner alone. Your father has a business meeting he just can't move." My son looked visibly disappointed, but he understood. What he didn't know was that I had a plan. The night of the dinner, instead of wearing one of my designer dresses or my expensive jewelry, I put on simple clothes, a faded cotton skirt and a basic blouse. I took off all my jewelry, except for a cheap costume ring. My hair, which is usually impeccably styled from the salon, I pulled back into a simple bun. I swapped my French perfume for a cheap cologne and traded my Lexus for a regular taxi. When I arrived at the Montgomery mansion, I was impressed, even though I'm used to luxury. It was an imposing structure, with meticulously cared-for gardens and a marble fountain at the entrance. I took a deep breath before ringing the bell. A housekeeper, in a uniform, opened the door and looked me up and down, barely hiding her surprise. "Good evening. I'm Sarah Anderson, Ryan's mom." She led me to a living room decorated with antique furniture that I recognized as valuable collector's pieces. There were Chloe, her father Alexander, her mother Caroline, and her older brother Julian. All of them were elegantly dressed for a simple family dinner. The shock on their faces when they saw me was almost comical. Chloe looked mortified, as if I had shown up to the party in flip-flops. Alexander barely disguised his disappointment, while Caroline forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So we finally meet the brilliant doctor's mother," Alexander said, extending his hand without much enthusiasm. "Chloe has told us so much about you." "I hope good things, Mr. Montgomery," I replied with a genuine smile. "Of course," he replied, motioning to an armchair. "Please, sit down. Can I offer you a glass of champagne?" "Oh, just water is fine, thank you. I'm not used to fancy drinks." I saw Caroline and Julian exchange glances, and Chloe's discomfort was palpable. The conversation that followed was one of the most revealing experiences of my life. "And what do you do, Mrs. Anderson?" Caroline asked, in an overly polite tone that barely hid her condescension. I improvised on the spot. "I'm a seamstress. I work from home, do small alterations, hems. Nothing very glamorous, but it helps with the bills." "Fascinating," she replied, clearly thinking the opposite. "And your husband?" "Michael works as a driver. He's on a private job tonight. That's why he couldn't come." Dinner was served, and I had never felt so watched. I intentionally made a few small etiquette mistakes, used the wrong fork, spilled a little sauce on the tablecloth, and made innocent comments about the quality of the food. I've never tasted anything so rich. Our day-to-day is more like peanut butter and jelly, and maybe a little ground beef, when we can afford it. Alexander could barely hide his disgust. "Well, when Ryan and Chloe get married, perhaps we can help them with an apartment near our neighborhood." It wouldn't be appropriate for my daughter to live in less favorable conditions. It was then that I noticed the terrified look in Chloe's eyes. It wasn't just embarrassment, there was something else. Fear. During dessert, I asked to use the powder room. The housekeeper showed me the way, but I accidentally turned in the wrong direction and found myself in a hallway with several doors. One of them was ajar, and I heard agitated voices coming from inside. "We can't let this happen." It was Julian's voice, Chloe's brother. "Did you see that woman? If the son is a doctor, how can the mother be so trashy?" "Calm down, son," Alexander replied. "All we need is to make sure he signs the prenup. If he's really as brilliant as they say, he'll soon realize he doesn't belong in this family. And what if he finds out about the business? No one will find out anything. The documents are well hidden." At that moment, my heart sped up. What kind of business was it that they needed to hide from my son? My instinct told me to get out of there, go back to the bathroom, and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But something about the mention of documents and the conspiratorial tone made me hesitate. I looked around the hallway. No one was in sight. The office door was ajar, allowing me to peek in. Alexander and Julian were standing with their backs to me, bent over a mahogany desk, examining some papers. Too focused to notice my presence. "The doctor can't know about Cancun," Julian said, his voice low but clear. "If he finds out how we got the permit for that clinic." "He's not going to find out," Alexander interrupted, gathering the papers. "We're going to put them in the safe, like always." I watched as Alexander walked over to a painting on the wall, a family portrait that I recognized as old because Chloe still looked like a teenager in it. He moved the painting, revealing a built-in safe. He quickly entered a combination and put the documents inside. I backed away silently, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid they could hear it. I found the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and tried to gather my thoughts. What could be so terrible about a clinic in Cancun that it needed to be hidden from my son? When I returned to the dining room, I forced myself to maintain the facade. I smiled naively as Caroline offered me coffee. "Is this instant coffee?" I asked, keeping up my act. "At home, we just drink the cheapest store-brand instant coffee." I saw Chloe shrink slightly in her chair. It seemed like every word I said made her sink deeper into her own discomfort. "Mrs. Anderson," Alexander began with his falsely friendly tone, "tell me, what are your thoughts on a prenuptial agreement? It's just a formality, of course, to protect the interests of both families." "Prenuptial?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't really understand much about those lawyer things. Ryan and I never talked about that." "Dad, please," Chloe interrupted, visibly uncomfortable. "Can we discuss this another day?" Alexander shot his daughter a severe look. "Darling, it's just business. Mrs. Anderson understands, don't you? We have to protect the family estate." "Of course," I replied meekly. "You have so much to lose, and we have so little to offer besides my son's character." I saw something change in Caroline's gaze, a flash of guilt, shame. It was so fast I almost doubted I'd seen it. The rest of the night passed in a poorly concealed tension. When I finally said goodbye, I refused Alexander's offer to have his driver take me home. "Don't worry, I already called an Uber. I'm used to it." In the car, I could finally breathe. My mind was buzzing with questions. What secret was Chloe's family hiding? What was in those documents about a clinic in Cancun? And most importantly, did Chloe know about it? When I got home, Michael was waiting for me anxiously. "How did it go? Why are you dressed like that?" I told him everything. My plan, the cold reception, the conversation I accidentally overheard. My husband knew me too well to scold me for my little performance. "Sarah, you're unbelievable," he said, half worried, half amused. "But this business about a clinic in Cancun worries me. I'm going to ask our private investigator to look into it." Michael had contacts all over the country thanks to his businesses. The next morning, he had already made some calls. In the meantime, I received a message from Ryan. "Mom, what happened last night? Chloe is acting weird. She said her parents were surprised by your simplicity. Didn't you wear the dress we picked out?" I felt a pang of guilt. My son didn't deserve to be involved in this charade, but now I had to see it through to the end. Son, we need to talk in person. 2 hours later, Ryan was in our living room, stunned by my confession. You dressed up as poor? You've got to be kidding me, Mom. Why would you do that? Ryan, in 2 years they never wanted to meet us. Didn't that seem strange to you? I wanted to see how they would treat someone they considered inferior. And how did it go? Exactly as I feared. But there's more, honey. I told him about the conversation I overheard, about the hidden documents, about Cancun. The color gradually drained from his face. Chloe never mentioned any family business in Cancun, he said thoughtfully. In fact, she rarely talks about her dad's business at all. Ryan, your father is already investigating. Maybe it's nothing, but… No, Mom. You're right to be suspicious. He looked devastated. I always felt there was something Chloe wasn't telling me. A shadow over her whenever the topic of her family's fortune came up. 3 days went by. Michael received a call from his contact, and his face grew serious as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to me with a grave expression. The clinic in Cancun was shut down 5 years ago following reports of illegal procedures, organ transplants without proper authorization, altering wait lists. The case was covered up, but there are records in the courts. And guess who the official owner was? A shell company that leads directly to Alexander Montgomery. I froze when I heard that. Illegal transplants? Altering wait lists? It was much worse than I had imagined. Michael, this is… monstrous, I finally managed to say. People could have died while others skipped the line. My husband nodded grimly. According to my contact, there were at least 7 suspicious deaths of patients who were waiting for transplants. Patients who should have been prioritized but were passed over by others, with generous donations to the clinic. The living room door opened, and Ryan walked in. From his pale face and red eyes, I knew immediately that he had overheard our conversation. Ryan, how long have you known this? His voice was choked with emotion. Michael walked over to his son. I just received this information. We were about to tell you immediately. Ryan collapsed onto the sofa, running his hands over his face. I'm a doctor. I swore to save lives, and I was about to marry into a family that profited from the deaths of innocent people. He looked up, devastated. Does Chloe know this? That was the million-dollar question. Did our future daughter-in-law know about the shady family business? We can't be sure, I answered cautiously. But I remember the fear in her eyes during the dinner. It wasn't just embarrassment about her boyfriend's simple mother. There was something more. Ryan was silent for a few minutes, processing everything. Finally, he stood up with determination. I need to talk to her. Now. Son, wait. Michael tried to calm him. We need to think about how to approach this. If her family is involved in something this serious, it could be dangerous to confront them directly. Ryan shook his head. I'm not going to confront the family. I'm just going to talk to Chloe. She deserves a chance to explain herself. We couldn't dissuade him. As Ryan left, I exchanged a worried look with Michael. We both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next few hours were agonizing. I tried calling Ryan several times, but he didn't answer. When the clock struck 11 o'clock at night and we still hadn't heard from him, my worry turned to panic. The doorbell rang, startling me. I ran to the door and opened it to find Chloe standing there, her face tear-streaked, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Sarah, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Can I come in, please? I stepped aside, letting her in. Michael appeared in the hallway, equally surprised. Is Ryan with you? I asked, trying to control my anxiety. She shook her head. He left my house 2 hours ago. I thought he was here. My heart sank. He hasn't come home, and he's not answering his phone. Chloe collapsed onto the sofa, her hands trembling so much she could barely hold her purse. It's all my fault. It's all my family's fault. Michael and I sat down across from her, exchanging worried glances. Chloe, I began gently, we need you to be completely honest with us right now. What do you know about the clinic in Cancun? She lifted her red, swollen eyes to us. For a moment, I thought she would deny everything, but then I saw her face crumble. I found out 3 years ago, she said, her voice breaking. I found some documents in my dad's office. I confronted him, and he swore to me that everything was legalized, that they were just alternative procedures to save lives. She swallowed hard. I wanted to believe him. He's my dad, you know. But then I saw the names, the dates, the amounts. And you didn't report it? Michael stated, without judgment in his voice. I was scared, she confessed, the tears flowing freely now. My dad has connections everywhere. And then I met Ryan. And he is, everything I ever wanted in my life. Someone good, genuinely good. She looked at me directly. I was planning to tell him everything after the wedding, when we were far away, maybe even in another country. But now he knows. He knows, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Chloe nodded miserably. He was so furious. I've never seen him like that. He said he needed to think, that he didn't know if he could ever look at me again without seeing all those people who died waiting for organs that were sold to the highest bidder. At that moment, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding. Mrs. Sarah Anderson? Yes, this is she. We're calling from St. Mary's Hospital. Your son, Ryan Anderson, was admitted to the emergency room about half an hour ago. The world stopped. It can't be. What happened to my son? Michael and Chloe moved closer, the tension obvious on their faces. He was in a car accident. He's stable, but we need the family to come immediately. I hung up the phone and looked at Michael and Chloe. Ryan had an accident. He's at St. Mary's Hospital. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Chloe insisted on coming with us, and we didn't have the heart to refuse her. On the way, I couldn't help but wonder if the accident had really been an accident. If the Montgomery family found out that Ryan knew their secrets, I pushed the thought away. I couldn't let fear consume me now. At the hospital, we were led to a waiting room. The doctor who came to speak to us was a colleague of Ryan's. Dr. Paulo, how is my son? I asked, barely containing the desperation in my voice. He's stable, Mrs. Anderson. He suffered a concussion and some broken ribs, but nothing life-threatening. He hesitated. However, there is something strange about the accident. Strange how? Michael asked, his voice tense. The skid marks on the road suggest that another vehicle may have forced his car off the track. The police are investigating. Those words confirmed my worst fears. It hadn't been a simple accident. Someone had deliberately tried to hurt my son. I glanced at Chloe, who looked like she had lost all the color in her face. Can I see him? I asked the doctor, my voice trembling. Doctor, Paulo nodded. He's conscious, but on painkillers. Try not to upset him. We followed him down the hall to the room where Ryan was. My heart ached seeing my son lying in that hospital bed, with a bandage on his forehead and a heart monitor beside him. His eyes were closed, but they opened when we entered. Mom, Dad. His voice was hoarse. I rushed to his side, holding his hand. Michael stood on the other side of the bed, placing a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. We're here, son, Michael said, his voice calm despite the storm of emotions I knew he was facing. Ryan then noticed Chloe, standing hesitantly in the doorway. His expression hardened immediately. What is she doing here? He asked, his voice now harsh. She came with us, I explained gently. She was worried about you. Ryan looked away. Dr. Paulo said my accident might not have been an accident. I nodded grimly. He told us. Ryan, what happened? He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. After I left Chloe's house, I went for a drive to clear my head. I was on the canyon road when I noticed a black SUV following me. It seemed strange, but I didn't think much of it until it sped up and started cutting me off. I tried to swerve, but... He swallowed hard. The car slammed into the side of mine, forcing me off the road. I hit a tree. The last thing I remember is seeing the SUV speeding away. Chloe sobbed from the doorway. It was my brother, she said in a broken voice. I'm sure it was Julian. We all turned to her, shocked by the confession. How can you be sure? Michael asked, his voice controlled, but his eyes burning with fury. Julian has a black SUV. And when I got home after talking to Ryan, I overheard my dad on the phone with him. My dad sounded furious. He was saying something like, "You went too far," and that wasn't part of the plan. When they realized I had arrived, they hung up immediately. Ryan looked directly at Chloe, his eyes a mixture of pain and confusion. Why didn't you tell me about Cancun before, all these years? Chloe approached the bed, tears streaming freely down her face. I was scared, Ryan. Scared of losing you. Scared of my dad. He always said family is everything, that we have to protect the Montgomery name above all else. When I found out about the clinic, I felt so dirty, like I was carrying the weight of all those lives. And so you decided to marry a doctor? Ryan's voice was bitter. To clear your conscience? Chloe shook her head vehemently. No, I fell in love with you for the man you are, not your profession. I wanted to tell you everything, I swear. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I planned to do it after we were married, far away from my family's influence. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Michael spoke. We need to go to the police. We have to report what we know about the clinic and about this attempt on Ryan's life. Chloe paled even further. My dad will know it was me. He's never forgiven anyone who crossed him. And what do you suggest? That we do nothing while your brother tries to kill our son? My voice came out harsher than I intended. Chloe looked down. I'm not saying that. I'm just scared. Ryan surprised us by reaching out his hand toward Chloe. You don't have to face him alone. We can protect you. I looked at my son, astonished by his capacity for compassion even at this moment. Ryan, I can see the pain in her eyes. Chloe may have made the mistake of hiding the truth, but she's not responsible for her father's crimes or her brother's actions. And if she testifies, we'll have a better chance of getting justice. Michael checked his watch. It's almost 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's wait until early tomorrow to go to the station. Ryan needs to rest, and we all need to think clearly about how to proceed. I reluctantly agreed. One of us should stay here with Ryan tonight. I'll stay, Michael offered. You and Chloe go home and get some rest. Come back in the morning, and then we'll decide our next steps. I hesitated, not wanting to leave my son, but Michael was right. We needed to be rested for what was to come. I kissed Ryan's forehead and promised to be back first thing. On the way home, Chloe sat silently in the back seat of the car. Only when I parked in our garage did she speak. Sarah, I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to, but I want you to know that I love your son more than anything. I never wanted him to get hurt. I turned to look at her. Instead of the confident, elegant young woman I had met, I saw only a scared, lost girl. I don't hate you, Chloe. I'm disappointed and worried, but I don't hate you. Now, let's go inside. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I barely knew how long it would be. That night was one of the longest of my life. I offered Chloe the guest room, but I doubt either of us slept much. My mind kept replaying everything. The dinner charade, the horrible discovery about the clinic, Ryan's accident. How a simple curiosity about my son's fiancé's family had turned into this nightmare. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already in the kitchen making coffee when Chloe appeared. Her eyes were swollen, and deep dark circles marked her young face. Good morning, she said shyly. Can I help with anything? I motioned to the kitchen table. Sit down. I'll make us something to eat before we go to the hospital. As I made toast and eggs, Chloe sat in silence, stirring her coffee cup distractedly. Finally, she spoke. I've never met anyone like your family. I looked at her, intrigued. How so? You're real. Even with money, you're not like my family. For my parents, everything was always about appearances, about upholding the Montgomery name above all else. She hesitated. When you showed up at that dinner dressed like that, I saw how they treated you, and I felt so ashamed. I sat down at the table with the plates of food. That's why I did it, Chloe. I wanted to see who the people my son was getting involved with really were. And you found out the worst? She said bitterly. I sighed. I found a family with dark secrets, it's true. But I also discovered that you love my son enough to stand up to your own family for him. That counts for something. She looked at me in surprise. Even after everything that's happened, you can still see something positive in me? I see a young woman who grew up in a toxic environment and is still trying to do the right thing, even if it's late. I paused. But Chloe, from now on, the truth is the only way. We can't have any more secrets. She nodded, her eyes welling with tears. I promise. I won't hide anything else. We finished breakfast in a tense silence and got ready to leave. Just as I was about to grab the car keys, my cell phone rang. It was Michael. Sarah. His voice was tense. Ryan's being discharged. We're on our way home now, but there's something else. Alexander Montgomery came to the hospital this morning. My blood ran cold. What? What did he want? He tried to see Ryan, but security wouldn't let him in. I had given specific instructions about visitors, so he left an envelope for his future son-in-law. What was in the envelope? Money. A lot of money. And a note that said, "For your medical treatment, we hope you recover quickly and forget this unhappy incident." I felt my rage build. Does he really think he can buy our son's silence? Apparently. But this only proves he's involved. No one offers money like that unless they're trying to cover something up. I looked at Chloe, who seemed to be listening to my side of the conversation with growing dread. "We're heading home right now," I told Michael. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and turned to Chloe, whose face had gone even paler. "My dad went to the hospital, didn't he?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded grimly. "Yes. And he left Ryan money with a message suggesting he forget the incident." Chloe closed her eyes, as if in physical pain. Classic Dad. He's always believed money can solve any problem. "Well, he's about to find out there are some things money can't buy," I replied, grabbing my purse. "Let's go." Michael and Ryan are on their way. During the drive, Chloe was silent, lost in her own thoughts. When we arrived at the house, Michael's car was already in the driveway. We went inside and found Ryan sitting on the living room sofa, pale and with his arm in a sling, but visibly relieved to be home. Michael was on the phone, speaking in a low voice. I rushed to hug my son, careful not to hurt him. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." He tried to smile, but the pain was evident in his eyes. Then his gaze found Chloe, standing hesitantly in the entryway. Something in his expression softened. "Chloe?" She took a few steps forward, unsure. "Ryan, Before she could finish, Michael hung up the phone and joined us, his expression serious. "That was my contact at the police department," he explained. I explained the situation, and he's going to meet us in an hour. He said it's better if we talk in private before making an official report. "Does your father know we're going to the police?" I asked Chloe. She shook her head. "No, but he'll find out soon. He has informants everywhere." "Then, we need to be fast," Michael concluded. "And we need concrete proof. Chloe, you said you saw documents. Do you know where he keeps them?" "In the safe in his office," she replied. I can get the combination. He changes it periodically, but he always uses variations of our birthdays." Ryan shifted on the sofa, visibly uncomfortable. "We can't just break into his house and steal documents. That would be illegal." "Not as illegal as trying to have you killed," I retorted, more harshly than I intended. "Sarah's right," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "We need those documents. My police contact can get a search warrant, but it will take time, and by then Alexander will have destroyed everything." "I can go back there," Chloe offered, surprising everyone. "I can say I forgot some things, that I need clothes. They won't suspect me." Ryan stood up immediately, ignoring the pain. "No, it's too dangerous." "Ryan's right," I agreed. "If your dad or your brother suspects." "It's our only chance," Chloe insisted, a new determination in her eyes. "I know that house better than anyone. I know when my dad will be in meetings, when my mom goes to her club, and Julian is rarely home during the day." Michael and I exchanged looks. He nodded slightly. "She's right. It's risky, but it might work." "No," Ryan protested again. "There has to be another way." Chloe walked over to him, taking his hands in hers. "Ryan, I need to do this. Not just for you, but for all those people who died waiting for transplants that were sold. I need to start making up for the damage my family caused." I saw the conflict in my son's eyes, between his fear for her and his recognition of the bravery she was showing. "Okay," he finally relented. "But you're not going alone. I'll go with you." "Ryan, you can barely stand," I argued. "I don't need to stand. I can wait in the car, be the getaway driver." He tried to smile, but I saw how determined he was. Besides, if something goes wrong, I'm the one person her family won't try to hurt immediately. Don't be so sure about that, Chloe muttered. Michael checked his watch. We have to decide now. The investigator will be here in 40 minutes. I looked at Chloe, at her young face, now set with a steely resolve. When would be the best time to get into the house? This afternoon, she replied without hesitation. It's Tuesday. My dad has bank meetings late. My mom has her spa day on Thursdays, but today she has a charity luncheon that lasts all afternoon. And Julian. She hesitated. Well, he usually doesn't come home until late at night. Then it's this afternoon, Michael decided. But we need a detailed plan, and you're not going alone, Chloe. I already said I'll go with her, Ryan insisted. No, son. Michael was firm. You were just discharged from the hospital. Sarah will go with Chloe. Me? I asked, surprised. Michael nodded. You've been in the house. You know the layout. And if anyone asks, you can say you're there to pick up Chloe's things like a concerned future mother-in-law. The idea made me nervous, but Michael was right. It was the most logical option. All right, I agreed, turning to Chloe. But we have to be fast and quiet. She nodded, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of what might be hope in her eyes. Thank you, she said simply, for trusting me after everything. Don't thank me yet, I replied. We still have to get those documents. The plan was relatively simple, at least in theory. Chloe and I would go to the Montgomery mansion around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when both Alexander and Caroline would be out. Chloe would use the excuse of grabbing some clothes and personal items, and I would accompany her as emotional support. Once inside, she would discreetly lead me to Alexander's office, where we would try to open the safe and photograph the documents about the Cancun clinic. Michael gave us a small device that looked like an ordinary pen, but was actually a high-resolution camera. We use this to document contracts in meetings, he explained. Just press the top to capture the image. The police investigator, Commander Mendez, arrived promptly. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes that seemed to notice every detail of the room. Michael had known him for years, and there was a mutual trust between them. We explained the situation, and Chloe recounted everything she knew about her father's shady dealings. The commander listened intently, taking occasional notes. This is extremely serious, he said finally. If we can prove Alexander Montgomery's involvement with that clinic in Cancun, we're talking about multiple serious charges, not to mention the attempted murder of Dr. Anderson. And what about my family's safety? Michael asked. Alexander Montgomery is a powerful man with a lot of connections. As soon as we make the formal complaint, I can provide police protection, the commander guaranteed. But we need concrete evidence. The documents you mentioned would be crucial. We'll get them this afternoon, I stated, with more confidence than I actually felt. The commander looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. It's risky, Mrs. Anderson. If you're caught, we won't be, Chloe interrupted. I know every corner of that house, and I know exactly when everyone will be out. Even so, I'd prefer you have backup, the commander said thoughtfully. I can park an unmarked car a block from the mansion. Any sign of trouble, you call this number. He handed us a card with a cell phone number. We spent the next hour refining the details of the plan. Ryan was still visibly upset about not participating directly, but he finally relented when Michael suggested he could be more useful analyzing the documents later with his medical knowledge. When the commander left, we had only a few hours until it was time to act. Michael insisted we all eat something, although no one had much of an appetite. You need your strength, he said, making sandwiches. We don't know what the rest of the day will be like. As we ate in tense silence, I watched Chloe. There was a subtle but undeniable transformation in her. The sophisticated, somewhat distant young woman I had met 2 years ago now seemed more human, more vulnerable, but also stronger in a way. I realized that, despite everything, I was starting to admire her. At 1:30 in the afternoon, it was time to leave. Ryan hugged Chloe for a long time, whispering something in her ear that made her smile through her tears. Michael held me tight. Be very careful, he murmured. If you sense anything wrong, get out immediately. No document is worth your life. Don't worry, I replied, trying to sound confident. We'll be back before you know it. The drive to the Montgomery mansion was silent. Chloe seemed lost in thought, staring out the window as I drove. Finally, as we turned onto the tree-lined street where the property was located, she spoke. I never thought I'd be doing this one day, betraying my own family. You're not betraying your family, Chloe, I replied gently. You're choosing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. That takes more courage than blindly following family loyalties. She looked at me with gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for giving me a second chance, even after I hid so much. I parked a short distance from the mansion's entrance. As planned, we would call the housekeeper to announce our arrival only when we were close, to minimize the time we'd spend inside. Chloe took her cell phone out of her purse and dialed. Maria? Hi, it's me, Chloe. I'm stopping by to get some clothes and documents. Yes, I'm with Ryan's mom. No, we don't need anything. We're just going to be in and out quick. My dad and mom aren't home, right? Perfect. We'll be there in 5 minutes. She hung up and turned to me. All set. Maria is the only one home, and she's usually in the kitchen or the service area. I drove up to the imposing gates of the mansion. Chloe entered a code, and the gates swung open silently. As we drove up the long, circular driveway, I felt my heart quicken. Maria, a middle-aged woman in a spotless apron, greeted us at the door with a gentle smile. Miss Chloe, how nice to see you. And Mrs. She clearly hesitated, not recognizing me from my previous, costumed visit. Sarah Anderson. I introduced myself with a smile. Ryan's mom. Oh, yes, of course. She opened the door wider. Please come in. We're just going up to my room and to the office to grab some university documents, Chloe explained casually. Don't worry about us, Maria. As you wish, miss. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything. As soon as Maria walked away, Chloe led me upstairs. My room first, she whispered. So it doesn't look suspicious. Chloe's room was exactly as I would have imagined. Elegant, sophisticated, in shades of gray and pale pink. She quickly grabbed a small suitcase and started putting some clothes and personal items into it. We have to be quick, she murmured. The office is on the ground floor, near the living room. After a few minutes, we went downstairs with the suitcase. Maria was nowhere in sight. Chloe guided me down a side hallway to a carved, dark wood door. My dad's office, she whispered. It's usually locked, but... She pulled a key from her purse. I took it from my mom's keychain before I left home yesterday. The door opened silently. The office was an imposing room, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive mahogany desk, and, on the wall behind it, the family portrait I had seen during my first visit. Chloe gently closed the door behind us and walked over to the painting. The safe is behind here. She moved the painting, revealing a digital safe built into the wall. Her fingers trembled slightly as she entered a combination. It's his birthday, followed by mine, she explained in a low voice. There was a soft click, and the safe door swung open. Inside were several folders, documents, and a small box that looked like it held jewelry. This one, Chloe said, pulling out a red folder. Here are the documents about Cancun. She opened the folder on the desk, and we began to quickly examine the papers. They were contracts, bank transfers, lists of names with values written next to them, and correspondence between Alexander and doctors at the clinic. Even with my quick read, the content was shocking. Explicit instructions to prioritize patients who paid special fees, ignoring the official transplant list order. My God, I murmured, feeling sick as I read the details. How can anyone do this? Chloe didn't answer, just kept turning the pages while I photographed each document with Michael's camera pen. We were so focused that we didn't hear the footsteps approaching until the office door was abruptly thrown open. I knew you'd come back. We froze, staring at the figure in the doorway. Julian Montgomery, Chloe's brother, was staring at us with a cold smile on his lips. Time seemed to freeze. Julian stood in the office doorway, blocking our only exit. He was impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, but there was something in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine, a calculating coldness that reminded me of a predator. Julian, Chloe managed to say, her voice trembling, I thought you were at the office today. Clearly, he replied, his gaze shifting from Chloe to me, and then to the documents scattered on the desk. And I see you brought the mother-in-law, or should I say, the fake pauper. Impressive performance at that dinner, Sarah. You almost had me convinced. I tried to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. Julian, it's not what it looks like. It's not? He took a step into the room, closing the door behind him. I heard the click of the lock engaging. It looks like you're stealing private documents from my father's office. Or perhaps evidence is the word you're looking for. Chloe moved slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that surprised me. Julian, please, do you even know what's in these documents? Do you know what Dad did? People died. Business is business, little sister, he interrupted coldly. Always so sensitive, aren't you? That's why Dad never trusted you with the family's affairs. He knew you were weak. It's not weakness to have a conscience, I retorted, my voice firmer than I expected. Julian laughed, a humorless sound. Says the woman who pretended to be poor to test others. Very moral of you. At least I didn't try to kill anyone, I replied, watching his reaction carefully. His face betrayed no emotion, but I saw a slight hardening in his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. Ryan's accident wasn't an accident, Chloe said, her voice stronger now. It was you in the black SUV, wasn't it? You tried to kill him because he found out about the clinic. Julian shrugged, not denying it. If the brilliant doctor had kept his nose out of our business, none of this would be necessary. He looked directly at Chloe. Dad trusted you, and you betrayed him. For a man you've only known for 2 years. Where's your loyalty, Chloe? My loyalty is with what's right, she replied, lifting her chin. Ryan didn't deserve what you did. None of those people on the waiting list deserved what Dad did. How noble, Julian sneered. Then his gaze returned to the documents. Well, unfortunately for you, I can't let you leave here with this. He moved his hand inside his jacket, and for a terrible moment, I thought he was reaching for a gun. Instead, he pulled out a cell phone. I'm calling Dad now. He'll know what to do with you two. It was our chance, maybe the only one we'd get. While Julian was distracted with the phone, I exchanged a quick glance with Chloe. She nodded imperceptibly, understanding my intention without words. Before you do that, I said, stepping forward to draw his attention, you should know we're not alone. Julian paused, his finger hovering over the phone's screen. What do you mean? The police are outside. I lied with all the conviction I could muster. If we're not out in the next 5 minutes, they're coming in. He hesitated for a second. Just a second, but it was enough. Chloe grabbed the heavy bronze sculpture that decorated her father's desk and in a swift motion that took me by surprise, threw it in her brother's direction. The sculpture missed him, but it made him flinch and step back instinctively. I used the distraction to grab as many documents as I could and shove them into my purse, while Chloe grabbed the red folder. Run! She yelled, pushing me toward the door as Julian was still off balance. She didn't have to tell me twice. We unlocked the door and sprinted down the hallway, hearing Julian's furious footsteps behind us. Maria! Maria! Call security! He shouted. We reached the entrance hall, where Maria appeared, confused by the commotion. Chloe didn't stop to explain. She just grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the front door. Miss Chloe, what's going on? The housekeeper asked, alarmed. I'm sorry, Maria, Chloe shouted over her shoulder as we burst through the door and ran outside. We raced down the circular driveway to my car. My hands were shaking so much I could barely get the key into the ignition. In the rearview mirror, I saw Julian emerging from the mansion's front door, his face contorted with rage. Go, 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 Chloe pleaded, looking back nervously. The engine finally caught, and I slammed my foot on the accelerator. We peeled out of the still-open gates. Only when we were several blocks away, blending into the normal city traffic, did I let myself breathe again. Are you okay? I asked Chloe, noticing she was trembling. She nodded, clutching the folder to her chest. Yes. Did you get the documents? I nodded, gesturing to my purse. Some. I hope it's enough. We need to call Commander Mendez, she said, grabbing her cell phone. Julian is going to call my dad, and they'll try to destroy any remaining evidence. While Chloe called the commander, I tried to focus on driving, but my thoughts were racing. We had just stolen private documents, technically a crime, but what those papers revealed was so much worse. He wants us to come straight to the station, Chloe reported after hanging up. He said to be careful, as my dad might try to intercept us. Ryan and Michael also need to know we're okay, I remembered, turning onto a busy street to make it harder to be followed. Chloe quickly called Ryan, reassuring him that we were safe and on our way to the station. When we arrived at the police station, Commander Mendez was waiting for us at the entrance. He quickly ushered us into a private room at the back. "Did you get the documents?" he asked as soon as the door closed behind us. Chloe placed the red folder on the table, and I added the papers I had stuffed into my purse, and I have photos of others, I added, handing him the camera pen. The commander quickly scanned the contents, his face growing more grim as he read. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "We have enough evidence here not only for the clinic fraud, but also to link it directly to Alexander Montgomery." He looked at Chloe. "Are you prepared to testify against your own father?" She hesitated for only a moment before nodding firmly. "Yes. People died because of his greed, and he tried to kill the man I love." "I'll need your formal statement," the commander said. "And yours too, Mrs. Anderson. I'm assigning protection to you and your families immediately." As the commander stepped out to make the necessary calls, Chloe turned to me, her eyes wet. "When this is all over, if Ryan still wants me, do you think your family could ever forgive me? Accept me again?" I took her hands in mine. "Chloe, what you did today took more courage than most people have in a lifetime. You chose to do the right thing, even at the cost of your own family. In my book, there's nothing to forgive. As for accepting you," I smiled genuinely, "I think you're already part of our family." The tears finally spilled over, and she hugged me impulsively. I hugged her back, realizing that of all the ways I had imagined meeting my son's fiancé's family, I could never have predicted this. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Based on the documents we obtained and the testimonies of Chloe and some former clinic employees that Commander Mendez managed to locate, Alexander Montgomery was formally charged with fraud, corruption, and complicity in multiple counts of manslaughter. Julian was also charged, both for the crimes related to the clinic and for the attempted murder of Ryan. Alexander's arrest created a scandal that rocked the entire high society. The Montgomery financial empire began to crumble as investors and business partners pulled away, fearing association with the scandal. Caroline, Chloe's mother, filed for divorce, claiming complete ignorance of her husband's business dealings, a claim few believed, but no one could prove otherwise. Throughout it all, Chloe remained by Ryan's side. The engagement had been officially called off. They both agreed they needed time to process everything that had happened, but the love between them was evident to anyone who saw them together. Michael and I opened our home to Chloe, offering her a refuge from the chaos her family life had become. She was hesitant to accept at first, feeling she didn't deserve our kindness, but Ryan insisted, and eventually, she agreed. "Do you really think I'm doing the right thing?" Chloe asked me one evening as we were having tea on the porch. "Testifying against my own father?" I thought carefully before answering. "I think you're doing what your conscience tells you is right, and in the end, that's what matters. Besides," I added gently, "you're giving a voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves." She nodded silently, the tears that were once so frequent now rarer, replaced by a quiet determination. The trial for Alexander and Julian was scheduled to begin in a few months. In the meantime, life moved on in unexpected ways. One morning, I received a surprise visitor. Caroline Montgomery was at my door, looking like a shadow of the elegant, haughty woman I had met at that dinner. Her eyes were marked by deep circles, and there was a weariness in her face that no expensive makeup could hide. "Sarah," she said formally, "I apologize for showing up unannounced. Can we talk?" I invited her in, curious as to what would bring her to my home. I offered her coffee, which she accepted with slightly trembling hands. "I came to apologize," she began finally, her eyes fixed on the cup, "for the way I treated you that night, and to thank you for taking care of my daughter." I was momentarily speechless. Of all the things I expected to hear, an apology was not one of them. "Chloe is an extraordinary young woman," I replied eventually. "You must have done something right in raising her." Caroline smiled sadly. "I'd like to take the credit. But the truth is, Chloe was always different from us. More sensitive, more human. I think that's why Alexander never fully trusted her with the family business." She paused. "I knew something was wrong with that clinic, not the details, but I knew it wasn't completely legitimate, and I chose not to ask questions. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. Fear, cowardice, comfort, take your pick, she sighed deeply. The truth is, Alexander isn't the man I thought I married. Or maybe he is, and I just didn't want to see. I remained silent, letting her continue. I want to start over, she said, surprising me again. Sell everything. Donate a portion to the families affected by the clinic. Maybe travel, find some purpose. She looked me straight in the eye, and I'd like to try to rebuild my relationship with Chloe, if she'll have me. I think she'd like that, I replied honestly. When Caroline left, I was left thinking about how a simple curiosity about my son's fiancé's family had triggered a chain of events that changed so many lives. My little test of character had revealed so much more than I could ever have imagined. 6 months later, Alexander Montgomery was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Julian received 18 years. The family's assets were seized, and a compensation fund was set up for the families of the clinic's victims. Chloe testified at the trial, facing her father's icy stare with a dignity that filled me with pride. Ryan was by her side the entire time, his hand firmly holding hers as she recounted everything she knew about the Cancun clinic schemes. When the judge announced the sentence, I saw no satisfaction on Chloe's face, only profound relief, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Alexander, on the other hand, remained impassive until the end, refusing to acknowledge his daughter or show any remorse. "It's over," she whispered to Ryan as we left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters eager for a statement. "It's finally over, but in many ways, it was just the beginning." In the weeks following the trial, Chloe dedicated herself to working with the victims' families, helping to ensure they received the compensation they were due. She sold her share of the remaining family assets and donated half the value to health institutions that worked with ethical transplants. The other half she invested in the foundation she started with Ryan, the New Opportunity Foundation, dedicated to improving transparency and justice in the organ transplant system. Caroline, surprisingly, became an ally in this mission. After selling the mansion and most of her jewelry, she moved into a modest apartment and began working as a volunteer at the foundation. The relationship between mother and daughter, once distant and formal, gradually transformed into something more genuine, built on a new mutual understanding. As for Ryan and Chloe, they decided to start fresh. The formal engagement was canceled, but they continued to be together, rebuilding their relationship on a more honest foundation. One Sunday afternoon, about a year after the whole ordeal had begun, we were all gathered in our backyard for a family lunch. Michael was grilling. Ryan and Chloe were sitting together in a hammock, talking quietly, and Caroline was helping me make a salad in the kitchen, a scene that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Watching that scene, I was overcome with a sense of gratitude. Despite all the pain and turmoil, something beautiful had emerged from the ashes. Ryan got up from the hammock and walked over to me with an enigmatic smile. "What's up?" I asked, intrigued by his expression. "You remember that dinner, when you dressed up as poor?" I couldn't help but smile wryly. How could I forget? It was the beginning of all this. Ryan looked over at Chloe, who was now chatting with Michael near the grill. "You know, Mom, I was furious when I found out what you did. I thought it was manipulative, unnecessary." He paused. "But looking back now, I realize your instinct was right. There was something wrong, and you sensed it. I never imagined it would be something so serious," I confessed. "I just wanted to see how they'd treat someone they considered inferior." "And you ended up saving lives," he said simply. "If that scheme had continued, how many more people would have died waiting for organs that were being sold to the highest bidder?" I thought about that, about the unexpected consequences of an impulsive action driven by mere curiosity. "Besides," Ryan continued, a twinkle in his eye, "if it weren't for you, I might never have known the real Chloe, the woman behind the sophisticated Montgomery facade." I looked at Chloe, who was now laughing at something Michael had said. She was different, lighter, more authentic, as if she had finally found her place in the world. "She is extraordinary," I agreed. "To stand up to her own family for what's right, not many people would have that courage." Ryan pulled something from his pocket, a small blue velvet box. which is why I decided it's time. My heart leaped as I recognized what it was. Ryan, are you sure? He smiled, confident. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We went through the worst together, Mom. Whatever comes after this will be a piece of cake. That evening, during dinner, Ryan got down on one knee in front of Chloe and opened the small box, revealing a simple but elegant ring, nothing like the flashy diamond from the first engagement. Chloe Montgomery, he said, his voice steady despite the obvious emotion. We've seen the worst of each other, and we still chose to stay together. I don't need an influential family or a fortune. I just need you, exactly as you are. Will you marry me? Chloe's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, unable to speak. When Ryan placed the ring on her finger, we all cheered. The only condition, Ryan added with a playful grin, is that my mom promises to come as herself to the wedding. No costumes this time. We all laughed, including me. I promise, I said, raising my glass in a toast. 2 months later, Ryan and Chloe were married in a simple ceremony in our backyard. There was no excessive luxury or ostentation, just love, truth, and the family we had created, not by blood, but by choice. During the reception, Chloe came over to me, radiant in her simple white dress. Sarah, she said, taking my hands, I never properly thanked you for that dinner. I raised my eyebrows, surprised. For pretending to be poor and embarrassing me, she smiled. For giving me the chance to see my family through someone else's eyes. For making me question everything I had accepted as normal for so long. She squeezed my hands. You showed me that family isn't about status or appearances, but about love and values. And now, she looked at Ryan, who was chatting animatedly with some friends. Now I have the chance to build the right kind of family. I hugged my daughter-in-law, my daughter, in so many ways that matter. And I thought about how unpredictable life can be. My little charade, planned as a simple test of character, had triggered a series of events that permanently changed the course of our lives. I still think sometimes about the families of those who died waiting for organs that never came because of Alexander Montgomery's greed. I think about how, in some small way, a delayed justice was served for them. How, from the ashes of a tragedy, something new and hopeful was born. And I think about how we should never judge someone just by the name they carry or the family they come from. Chloe proved that we are defined not by our origins, but by the choices we make when faced with the truth. Today, 3 years after that fateful dinner, Ryan and Chloe are expecting their first child. The New Opportunity Foundation has already helped implement new transparency protocols in dozens of hospitals. Caroline has found a new purpose as a volunteer lawyer for low-income families, and I've learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. I still wonder occasionally what would have happened if I had just gone to that dinner as myself, dressed in my expensive clothes and fine jewelry. Maybe Alexander would have treated me with respect. Maybe we never would have discovered his crimes. Maybe more people would have died. But one thing is for sure. I will never regret that night I pretended to be poor to meet my daughter-in-law's family, and I ended up discovering a devastating secret that would change our lives forever.